Drill Sergeant Krafthnog stood at attention, his forearms crossed behind his massive back, watching another batch of pathetic recruits stumble through what the Galactic Military Academy laughingly called basic training. The morning sun of Kepler 442 billion cast long shadows across the facility's infamous obstacle course, a twisted maze of death traps that had claimed more lives than the actual war. "Another beautiful day in paradise," Krafthnog muttered, his mandibles clicking with amusement. His yellow eyes swept across the training ground, taking inventory of today's fresh meat. 3 Zephyrians, their blue skin already turning pale with fear. 2 crystalloids who looked like they might shatter if someone sneezed too hard. And then wait. What in the 7 hells was that thing? Standing at barely 6 feet tall, with disgustingly pink flesh and only 2 arms, the creature looked like someone had taken a proper warrior and removed all the useful parts. No natural armor. No claws, no venomous sacs, just soft, squishy meat wrapped in regulation combat gear that hung loose on its pathetic frame. "Human," Krafthnog spat, checking his datapad. "Brandon Torres, species designation, recently discovered primitives from Sol 3. He snorted, a sound like grinding metal. Command must be scraping the bottom of the galactic gene pool these days. The obstacle course stretched before them like a mechanical nightmare. Plasma walls that could vaporize bone in microseconds, gravity fields that could crush a Gornak flat, automated turrets with targeting systems so precise they could put a hole through a gnat's left antenna. And that was just the warm-up section. In his 15 years as a drill sergeant, Krafthnog had perfected the art of breaking recruits. Not just their bodies, though he was quite good at that too. No, he specialized in crushing their spirits, watching the exact moment when hope died in their eyes. It was beautiful, really. Like art. "All right, maggots." His voice boomed across the training ground, enhanced by vocal amplifiers that made his words sound like an avalanche. "Welcome to Hell Academy, where dreams go to die and weaklings go to, well, they just go to die." The recruits flinched. All except the human, who seemed to be, was that creature actually smiling. Krafnog's mandibles twitched with irritation. Clearly, this Brandon Torres hadn't grasped the severity of his situation. "You see that obstacle course?" Krafthnog gestured with one of his primary arms toward the mechanical death trap. 97% failure rate. Of the remaining 3%, half end up in medical pods for the next 6 months. The other half? He paused for dramatic effect. "Well, let's just say they develop a healthy respect for authority." The human raised his hand. Actually raised his pathetic little appendage like he was in some civilian classroom. "Yes, Sergeant. But what about the fun parts?" Krafnog's eye twitched. In 15 years, no recruit had ever asked about fun parts. They usually asked about survival rates, medical facilities, or if they could call their mothers. "Fun?" Krafthnog leaned down, bringing his scarred face close to the human's. His breath could strip paint, and his yellow eyes had made grown Gornak warriors wet themselves. "Son, the only fun you'll have here is when you're bleeding out, and I'm deciding whether to call the medics." Brandon Torres actually chuckled. The sound was so unexpected that Krafthnog took a step back. "Oh good," the human said, still grinning. "For a moment there I thought this was going to be boring." Krafthnog had built his reputation on 2 things, his ability to break recruits and his tendency to have training accidents when dealing with particularly annoying species. Word had spread through the academy that crossing Drill Sergeant Krafthnog was a career-ending move. Literally. But this human, this Brandon Torres, there was something wrong with him. No creature should be that calm in the face of certain death. It violated every natural law of survival that Krafthnog understood. "We'll see how funny you find it when you're picking plasma shrapnel out of your soft little hide," Krafthnog growled, turning away to hide his confusion. As he walked toward the control station, Krafnog's mind raced. In all his years of training the galaxy's most dangerous species, he'd never encountered anything like this human. The creature's casual attitude wasn't bravado or stupidity. It was something else entirely. Something that made Krafnog's warrior instincts scream warnings he'd never felt before. "All right, recruits," he called out, his finger hovering over the activation switch. "Let's see what you're made of." He had no idea he was about to find out exactly what humans were made of, and why the rest of the galaxy was about to learn a very important lesson about underestimating pink, squishy creatures from a backwater planet called Earth. The first obstacle was simple enough, a 30-foot wall of electrified metal that discharged enough voltage to stop a charging rhino beast. Standard procedure called for recruits to use the provided climbing gear, which took approximately 15 minutes for even the most athletic species to complete. Brandon Torres walked up to the wall, placed his bare hands on the electrified surface, and started climbing like he was ascending a playground ladder. What the Krafhthnog's mandibles dropped open as sparks cascaded around the human's body. The creature should have been convulsing on the ground, not humming what sounded suspiciously like a tune from his homeworld. "Great workout." Brandon called down from the top of the wall. "Do you have anything with more voltage?" "This is like a gentle massage." The Zephyrian recruit, Moran, whimpered and took 3 steps backward. His blue skin had turned a sickly green color. "Sergeant," he whispered, "is that normal human behavior?" "Shut up, maggot," Krafthnog barked, but his voice cracked slightly. Nothing about this was normal. The human should be dead. At minimum, he should be unconscious and twitching. Instead, Brandon dropped down from the wall with a casual flip and dusted off his hands. "What's next, Sergeant?" "Please tell me it involves explosives." Krafhthnog's eye began to twitch again. 15 years of experience told him to escalate. Make the challenge impossible. Break the recruit's confidence with overwhelming force. "Gravity chamber," he snarled, pointing toward a cylindrical structure that hummed with barely contained power. "Standard setting is 3 times normal gravity. Enough to turn your bones into powder." "Ooh, fancy." Brandon practically skipped toward the chamber. "Can we crank it up to 10? I want to feel something." Morden, a crystalloid whose species was renowned for their logical thinking, began calculating survival probabilities out loud in a panic-stricken whisper. 0.001% chance of survival, no. Wait, that assumes normal physiology, recalculating, still 0.001%. Krafthnog set the gravity multiplier to 5 times normal. The chamber door sealed shut with a hydraulic hiss. Through the observation window, he watched Brandon Torres do jumping jacks. Jumping jacks in 5 times gravity, while whistling. "This is impossible," Krafthnog muttered, checking his control readings. The equipment was functioning perfectly. The gravity field was definitely active. The human should be a pancake on the floor. Instead, Brandon pressed his face against the observation window and gave a thumbs-up gesture. "Can we add some music? Maybe some spinning disco lights? Really get the party started." The other recruits had formed a huddle at the far end of the training ground. Moran was openly crying. Morden had begun chanting mathematical formulas like protective mantras. Even the Gornak twins, who were supposedly fearless, looked ready to bolt for the nearest transport ship. 10 minutes, Krafthnog announced through the chamber's intercom. "Standard endurance test." "OWWO only 10? Can we make it an hour? I was just getting warmed up." That was it. That was the moment Krafhthnog's legendary patience finally snapped. In 15 years of breaking recruits, he'd never encountered a species that treated mortal danger like recreational activity. It violated everything he understood about survival instincts. It made him question his entire worldview. And it was really, really annoying. "Emergency termination," he bellowed, slamming the release button. The gravity chamber powered down and Brandon bounced out like he'd just finished a relaxing spa session. "Thanks, Sergeant." That was almost challenging. "What's next? Laser maze? Acid rain? Ooh, do you have any of those spinning blade things?" Krafhthnog's 4 hands clenched into fists. His yellow eyes had taken on a distinctly murderous gleam. The other recruits began backing away even further, recognizing the signs of an impending explosion. "Weapons demonstration," Krafthnog growled, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Standard plasma rifle. Maximum setting." He drew his sidearm, a military-grade plasma rifle capable of punching holes through battleship armor. The weapon hummed to life with a sound like barely contained thunder. "Now, recruits, observe proper firing stance." Krafthnog raised the rifle, ostensibly aiming at a target dummy 50 meters away. But his finger was already applying pressure to the trigger, and the barrel was slowly swinging toward Brandon Torres. "Ooh, can I try next?" Brandon asked, apparently oblivious to the fact that he was about to become an unscheduled casualty statistic. "I've always wondered what those things feel like." Moran screamed. Morden began frantically calculating the blast radius. The Gornak twins dove behind a concrete barrier. And Krafthnog, veteran of 3 galactic wars and holder of 17 commendations for valor, made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his career. He was going to have an accident. A very deliberate, very final accident. "Pay attention, recruits," he said, his voice deadly calm. "This is how you handle insubordination." The plasma rifle whined as it reached full charge. His finger tightened on the trigger. And Brandon Torres just stood there, smiling like someone had told him the galaxy's funniest joke. Time seemed to slow as Krafhthnog's finger completed its deadly journey. The plasma rifle discharged with a sound like reality tearing apart, sending a bolt of superheated energy screaming through the air at nearly the speed of light. The blast was powerful enough to vaporize a small building, hot enough to turn sand into glass, and fast enough that most species couldn't even register its passage before becoming a cloud of constituent atoms. Brandon Torres raised his right hand and caught it. Not deflected, not dodged. Caught, like someone had tossed him a ball. The plasma bolt, glowing white-hot and crackling with enough energy to power a small city, simply stopped. It hovered in Brandon's palm, swirling lazily like a miniature sun. The human examined it with the casual interest of someone inspecting a particularly nice piece of fruit. "Ah," Brandon said, tilting his head. "Bit warm, isn't it?" Krafhthnog's rifle clattered to the ground. His forearms hung limp at his sides. His mouth opened and closed like a fish trying to breathe air. No sound emerged except a faint wheezing noise that might have been his brain attempting to process what his eyes had just witnessed. Did he just? Moran stammered, his blue skin now a pale white. Did that primitive just catch plasma fire with his bare hand? Morden had stopped calculating entirely. His mathematical mind, trained to find logical solutions to impossible problems, had simply given up. "Error," he whispered. "Error. Error. Does not compute. Reality malfunction detected." The Gornak twins peeked over their concrete barrier, their 6 eyes wide with disbelief. One of them made a sound like a deflating balloon. The other began praying to 17 different deities in 5 languages. Brandon turned the plasma bolt over in his hand, examining it from different angles. "You know, Sergeant, this is pretty impressive engineering. Nice color, good heat distribution, excellent energy density." He paused, looking up at Krafthnog with that same infuriating smile. "Though I have to say, the targeting system could use some work." "Were you aiming for the dummy or for me?" Krafthnog tried to speak. His vocal cords had apparently forgotten their primary function. What emerged was a sound like grinding metal mixed with existential terror. "Because if you were aiming for me," Brandon continued conversationally, "you might want to recalibrate your sights. This thing went exactly where I expected it to go, which suggests either your aim is terrible," or he grinned wider. "You were trying to kill me." The plasma bolt continued to swirl in Brandon's palm, casting dancing shadows across his face. He held it up to the light like a gemstone, admiring the way the energy patterns shifted and flowed. "Either way," the human said, "this is excellent cardiovascular exercise. Really gets the blood pumping, you know? Though I was hoping for more of a challenge. This feels more like a warm-up than actual combat training." That word. That single, impossible word. Warm-up. The plasma bolt that could have destroyed a tank was a warm-up exercise. Krafhthnog's knees buckled. He sat down heavily on the training ground, his massive frame shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. His yellow eyes were fixed on the impossible sight of a human holding fire itself in his bare hand. "Sergeant?" Brandon asked, his voice filled with what sounded suspiciously like concern. "You okay there, big guy? You look a little pale." "Well, paler than usual. Is that how Vorthak physiology works?" "I'm still learning about alien biology." The other recruits had begun whispering among themselves in a dozen different languages. The universal translator was working overtime, but the general theme was consistent across species. But what is that thing? That's not possible. Humans are not supposed to be able to do that. I want to go home. Someone call medical. The sergeant looks like he's having a breakdown. Brandon seemed to notice the plasma bolt was still in his hand. Oh, right. Probably shouldn't hold on to this forever. He casually tossed it into the air, where it dissipated with a soft pop, like a soap bubble bursting. "There we go," he said cheerfully. "Safety first, right, Sergeant?" Krafthnog was muttering now, his voice barely audible. "Impossible physics don't work that way. 15 years of training, never seen anything like what are humans?" "Well," Brandon said, clapping his hands together, "that was fun. What's next on the agenda?" "More plasma rifle practice." "Maybe something with explosives?" "Ooh, do you have any of those gravity bombs I keep hearing about?" Moran had fallen to his knees and was making what appeared to be religious gestures toward Brandon. "He is a god," the Zephyrian whispered. "A terrible smiling god of destruction." "Negative," Morton corrected, his logical mind desperately trying to reassert itself. "Gods are theoretical constructs. This must be some form of advanced technology. Hidden force fields. Personal shield generators. Highly sophisticated trickery." "Then explain the smile," one of the Gornak twins demanded. "Explain why he looks like he's having the time of his life." Morton's voice trailed off. He had no explanation for the smile. No mathematical formula could account for joy in the face of certain death. Brandon Torres looked around at the circle of terrified alien faces, his expression shifting from amusement to something approaching sympathy. "Hey, don't look so worried," he said gently. "It's just basic human physiology. Nothing special. Where I come from, we call this Tuesday morning exercise routine." "Tuesday morning exercise routine." Krafthnog made a sound like a steam engine exploding and toppled backward onto the training ground, his eyes rolled back in his head and his limbs twitching spasmodically. Brandon looked down at the unconscious drill sergeant with genuine concern. "Maybe I should have mentioned I used to catch bullets for fun back in elementary school." Commander Tom Malley arrived exactly 12 minutes after the automated emergency alert triggered, his regulation boots clicking against the training ground with military precision. He was human himself, though unlike Brandon's casual demeanor, Malley carried himself with the kind of quiet authority that made even battle-hardened veterans stand at attention. "Report," Malley said simply, surveying the scene. One unconscious drill sergeant. 5 traumatized alien recruits huddled together like survivors of a natural disaster. And Brandon Torres sitting cross-legged on the ground, apparently trying to comfort a hyperventilating Zephyrian. "Sir." Moran gasped between panicked breaths. The human he caught fire. With his hands. The sergeant tried to kill him and he just caught it like a baseball, Brandon supplied helpfully. Though it was more like a softball, really. Good heat signature, nice energy distribution, but the speed could have been better. Malley's expression didn't change, but Krafthnog, who had regained consciousness just as the commander arrived, thought he detected the faintest twitch at the corner of the human's mouth. "Sergeant Krafthnog," Malley said, turning his attention to the still shaking drill instructor. "I assume you have an explanation for discharging your weapon during a training exercise?" Krafthnog struggled to his feet, his forearms trembling. "Sir, it was the human." He stopped, realizing how insane he was about to sound. "Commander, that creature violated the fundamental laws of physics." "Did he now?" Malley's tone was perfectly neutral, but there was something in his eyes that made Krafthnogg's warrior instincts scream danger warnings. And how exactly did Private Torres accomplish this miraculous feat? He caught plasma fire. Krafhthnog's voice cracked with desperation. I fired a maximum-setting plasma bolt directly at his center mass, and he caught it with his bare hand. It's impossible. Nothing can survive direct plasma contact. The energy requirements alone should have. Should have what, Sergeant? Molly interrupted quietly. Krafhthnog's mouth worked soundlessly. He was a drill sergeant, trained to break recruits, not to explain violations of universal constants. Should have killed him, he whispered finally. Molly nodded thoughtfully. Yes, it certainly should have. Any other species? Anyway. He pulled out a military-grade datapad and began scrolling through files marked with classification levels that made Krafhthnog's security clearance look like a library card. Let me share some information with you, Sergeant. Information that apparently wasn't included in your briefing materials. Molly's fingers danced across the datapad's surface. Humans were discovered approximately 18 months ago by a routine scouting expedition. Initial reports classified them as primitive bipeds with rudimentary tool usage. The alien recruits had gathered closer, drawn by morbid curiosity and the need to understand what they'd witnessed. However, Molly continued, subsequent observation revealed some interesting discrepancies. The first survey team reported humans engaging in recreational activities that defied logical explanation. Throwing themselves from great heights with fabric wings, diving into freezing water for entertainment, deliberately provoking large predators for something called sport. Krafthnog felt his mandibles begin to twitch again. That's just typical primitive stupidity, sir. Most species go through a reckless phase before developing proper survival instincts. But here's where it gets fascinating, Molly said, his smile becoming more pronounced. When the survey team attempted to establish contact using standard first contact protocols, the humans welcomed them with enthusiasm, particularly when they learned about galactic warfare. He scrolled to another file, this one marked with enough security classifications to make Krafhthnog's eyes water. It seems humans had been engaged in warfare among themselves for their entire recorded history. Not survival conflicts or territorial disputes, Sergeant. Warfare as a form of cultural expression. They developed weapons capable of destroying their entire planet. Then continued fighting with them for decades while somehow avoiding extinction. Brandon raised his hand again. To be fair, we got pretty close a few times. But hey, practice makes perfect, right? Molly chuckled, actually chuckled, at this casual reference to planetary genocide. When Galactic Command learned about human military capabilities, they faced a choice. Either classify humans as a galactic threat and prepare for another species war, or recruit them, Krafthnog said slowly, the horrible truth beginning to dawn. Precisely. Humans were offered membership in the galactic military with full honors and immediate assignment to elite training programs. They accepted with what our xenopsychologists described as unseemly enthusiasm. Molly scrolled to another file, this one containing what appeared to be medical reports. Subsequent testing revealed that human physiology is unique. Their pain tolerance is approximately 40 times higher than the galactic average. Their reflexes are enhanced by adrenaline production that would be lethal to most species. And their psychological response to danger involves increased cognitive function rather than paralysis or flight. But catching plasma fire, Krafthnog whispered, is actually well within documented human capabilities, Molly finished. Though Brandon here represents the upper end of the curve, most humans would have only been able to deflect the bolt. Brandon actually absorbed and dissipated the energy harmlessly. The commander closed his datapad and looked directly at Krafthnog. The elite training program you've been assigned to isn't designed to break human recruits, Sergeant. It's designed to teach other species how to fight alongside beings that consider mortal danger a recreational activity. He paused, letting that sink in. In other words, Sergeant, you're not training humans to be soldiers. You're training soldiers to survive working with humans. Krafthnog sat down heavily again, his worldview collapsing for the second time in one day. "Welcome to the new Galactic Order," Molly said cheerfully. "Try not to shoot any more recruits." After Commander Molly departed with a casual salute and what Krafthnog was now certain was a barely suppressed laugh, an uncomfortable silence settled over the training ground. The alien recruits looked between their shell-shocked drill sergeant and the human who had just casually redefined the laws of physics. Brandon Torres stood up, dusted off his uniform, and clapped his hands together. "Well, that was educational. So, Sergeant, what's next on the training schedule?" Krafthnog stared at him with the expression of someone who had just watched his entire reality collapse into a singularity. The schedule. His voice trailed off into incoherent muttering. "Right then," Brandon said cheerfully. "I guess that means I'm in charge now." He turned to face the group of terrified aliens with the enthusiasm of a summer camp counselor. "Don't worry, everyone. We'll take this nice and easy. No pressure, no impossible standards, just good old-fashioned teamwork." Moran raised a trembling hand. But you caught fire with your bare hand. How are we supposed to compete with that?" "Oh, that?" Brandon waved dismissively. "That's nothing special. Watch this." He walked over to the gravity chamber and cranked the settings up to maximum. The device hummed ominously as gravitational forces that could crush a battleship into a marble-sized sphere activated. Brandon stepped inside and began doing yoga poses. "The secret," he called out through the reinforced walls, his voice perfectly calm despite the fact that he should have been reduced to atomic paste, "is proper breathing techniques and core strength. Anyone can do it with enough practice." Morden began calculating again, his voice rising to a panicked squeak. 15 times normal gravity. That's 147 meters per second squared. His bones should be diamond dust. His blood should be pudding. His organs should be. "Relaxed?" Brandon suggested, emerging from the chamber and stretching like he'd just finished a pleasant nap. "You really should try it, Morden. Great for stress relief." The crystalloid fainted. Krafthnog, meanwhile, had backed himself against the control station and was frantically typing on his datapad. "Resignation letter," he muttered. "Immediate medical leave. Psychological evaluation. Transfer to desk duty. Anywhere but here." Now, Sergeant," Brandon said, noticing the frantic typing. "No need for drastic measures. We're all friends here. Just because I accidentally demonstrated the basic human ability to manipulate fundamental forces doesn't mean we can't work together." "Basic human ability," Krafthnog repeated in a hollow voice. "Basic human ability to manipulate fundamental forces." "Exactly." Brandon beamed. "Now, who wants to learn about teamwork? The key to interspecies cooperation is understanding that everyone brings different strengths to the table." He gestured toward the Gornak twins. "You two are excellent at strategic thinking and have natural armor. Very useful." The twins tried to hide behind each other, which was physically impossible given their size. "Moran, your species has enhanced sensory capabilities and natural camouflage, perfect for reconnaissance." The Zephyrian had turned so pale he was practically transparent. "Morden, when he wakes up, has one of the most advanced analytical minds I've ever encountered. Incredible problem-solving abilities." The unconscious crystalloid twitched slightly. "And Sergeant Krafthnog here has decades of military experience and intimate knowledge of galactic combat doctrine." Krafthnog made a sound like a deflating balloon. Brandon walked over to the obstacle course control panel and began adjusting settings. "The thing is, you've all been approaching this backwards. This isn't about surviving impossible challenges. It's about learning to work as a team where one member of that team happens to consider impossible challenges a light warm-up." He activated a training scenario that would have been challenging for a fully equipped Special Forces unit. Laser grids, automated turrets, gravity wells, plasma barriers, the works. "Who wants to go first?" Brandon asked brightly. The recruits looked at him like he'd just suggested they jump into a black hole for fun. "No volunteers? Okay, team exercise then." Before anyone could protest, Brandon had herded them all toward the obstacle course entrance. Remember, the goal isn't to do everything yourself. It's to use everyone's strengths together. What followed could only be described as the most terrifying display of casual competence in galactic military history. Brandon treated every death trap like a playground equipment, casually dismantling defensive systems while cheerfully encouraging his teammates to contribute whatever they could. Great camouflage, Moran. You're invisible to the targeting sensors. Excellent calculations, Morden. Your trajectory analysis is spot on. Nice tactical thinking, Gornek squad. Flanking maneuvers are perfect. By the time they'd completed the course in record time, the alien recruits had gone from terror to something approaching awe. They'd actually succeeded, despite facing challenges that should have liquefied them. See? Brandon said as they gathered at the finish line. Interspecies cooperation at its finest. Everyone contributed, everyone succeeded, and nobody got vaporized. Though I have to say, that was the most fun I've had since basic training back on Earth. Krafthnog was now typing his resignation letter with all four hands simultaneously. The beautiful thing about working with humans, Brandon continued, addressing his new squad, is that we make everyone around us better. Not because we're superior, but because we're too stupid to recognize impossible situations. Which means we keep trying until we find solutions that everyone else missed. 3 hours later, Commander Mali returned to find Brandon Torres conducting an impromptu leadership seminar while Sergeant Krafthnog sat in a corner, rocking back and forth and muttering about early retirement. "Congratulations, Private Torres," Mali said, pinning Assistant Instructor insignia to Brandon's uniform. "Welcome to your promotion." "Thanks, Commander," Brandon replied. "This is going to be so much fun." Krafthnogg's resignation letter was approved that afternoon.